My name is Michael Reaves, and I was a writer on Dungeons & Dragons. I wrote, I believe, 7 episodes for the show. I moved to Los Angeles because I wanted to be a writer. And it was either live in Los Angeles or live in New York. I didn't want to live in New York, so I came to LA because I wanted to try my hand at television and movies. This was in 1974. I packed up everything that I had in a panel truck, and I drove here and found a small studio apartment, moved in, and started writing. A lot of people come to Los Angeles trying to get into TV, and a lot of people don't do it because they have to keep trying. The difference between making it and not making it is you just keep going. You just keep beating your head against the wall until you get in. And that's what I did. I guess I was too young and foolish not to know when to stop. And I finally met somebody who was willing to give me a chance. Instead of buying the story from me and assigning it to somebody else like he should have, he gave me a chance at the teleplay. I wrote it, and it worked. It was producible, and he was willing to buy it. And once you have one sale, you can get another sale. Once you get your foot in the door, then you can get your knee in the door, and then you can get your thigh in the door, you get your whole leg in the door, and eventually you're through the door, and then you're in. I don't really write for kids. I write for myself. Maybe that means I'm writing for a kid, I don't know, but I just sort of try and write stories that entertain me, and if that means that I'm writing for the kid in me, that's fine. But I think the only way you're going to tell really good stories is if you just write from a place within yourself. And if you're trying to write toward a market or toward a specific type of demographic, I just think you're limiting yourself. I started writing animation from when I first came to LA. It was a way to make some money. It was fun. I enjoyed it, and I was good at it. So I kept doing it. I started writing for Dungeons & Dragons because it seemed like a fun show. I wanted to write for the show. I saw some episodes of it and I thought, this is a show I want to write for. So I talked to the people at CBS about it, and they read some scripts that I had written for other shows, and they said, this will work, this guy will work. So they gave me an assignment, and that's how it started. It's that simple. Animation writing is very different from live action writing. It's much freer, it's much more inducive to imagination. You can do just about anything in animation writing. At the time of Dungeons & Dragons, writing in live action was much more restrictive because of budget limitations. In animation, you could do just about anything your imagination could come up with. You could create entire worlds, entire scenarios. You really didn't have any limitations. The fact that you've got the budget of an action-adventure movie for just about every episode that you can write. There are some things that are not so great about writing it. Sometimes you don't get as much of a range of motion in the characters that you'd like. Sometimes you don't get the acting that you want because you've got actors who are sort of working in a vacuum. They can't really see what they're doing or who their characters are. But all in all, it's a lot of fun. All in all, I'm glad it's something that I've done. It's certainly a direction that I didn't think my career was going to go in, but I'm not unhappy that it did. In season 2, I think there was a conscious change of direction for the show. I think they made a decision to go a bit darker and to delve more deeply into the characters. And I think it was a good decision. I think it was definitely the way to go, and I was certainly in favor of it. My stuff as a whole tends to be more darker and introspective anyway, and it was a good match, for the show in that respect.
Perhaps you will have better luck in the future. But now, there is great danger ahead. The Duke of Darkness has taken over the land of...
Wait, Dungeon Master. We only want to hear 2 things. How do we find Tiamat, and how do we use her to beat Venger once and for all?
A lot of people said that my scripts were among the darker ones of the show, and I really don't have a problem with that. That's the way my writing tends to be anyway. I don't think there's anything wrong with exploring that side of the human soul. I think that particularly in kids, it's necessary to dig into that area of the psyche and explore it. You can go, read the works of Bruno Bettelheim and all those people, and they make a good case for it.
Do you really believe a child like you could be Dungeon Master? This is your worst mistake, Cavalier, and it will be your last.
I like playing with the concepts on the show. I liked taking the characters into places that they hadn't been before. Most of all, I like the fact that we could do that on the show. That's unusual. It was unusual for Saturday morning at the time, very much. Most of the networks didn't want shows where the characters changed or went through any sort of emotional epiphanies. On one of the shows I wrote, The Dragon's Graveyard, we actually had the characters decide that the only way they were going to get out of the world that they were in was if they hunted down Venger, and if he didn't let them out, they were going to kill him. That's pretty heavy stuff for Saturday morning, particularly back then. And it was rather amazing that we got away with it. But it made for a very dramatic show. We see the bodies of or the skeletons rather, of a lot of the previous weapons owners that I guess we assume Dungeon Master brought in to further whatever means he had toward whatever end was supposed to be accomplished. And you have to wonder, what was he trying to do? What was his goal? And why was it necessary to go to such lengths to accomplish it?
Rise, my son.
I've always tried to tell stories that are redemptive at the end. And that means that at a certain point along the way, you have to go through the valley of the shadow if you're going to get to the other side. So if that means that at a few points along the way, you're going to get a little scared, that's what's going to happen, because you have to go through the dark to get to the daylight at the other end. The one thing that I liked about the show was the characters. I liked the fact there were interactions between the characters. They seemed real to me. That's why I wanted to work on the show. That's what made the show come alive for me, was to be able to work with those characters. There were some difficulties in separating the goals out for the kids, in that the big goal is, I want to get home. Everybody has the same goal in that I want to go home. But there's character interactions between the kids that's where the meat of the stories are. The interactions, for example, between Bobby and his sister, yes, and Eric and Hank, for example. The tug of war over the leadership between those two. There's real good meat for stories there. I got a lot of worthwhile stuff out of that. Or the sort of rivalry between Eric and Dungeon Master. That was a lot of fun. I got an entire script out of that. So there was just, the characters were rich, and that's why it was an easy show to write. Well, it wasn't an easy show to write for, but it was a fun show to write for.
I gotta get a new hat.
I thought Presto was a character who was somewhat underwritten, at least in my stories. I would have loved to have given him a little more to do, and it just didn't work out that way. The idea of a sort of a fledgling wizard who could pull anything out of his hat, but it was never really what he thought he wanted, was a fun idea, and I kind of wish I'd done more with it. Presto, after all, had the greatest power, theoretically, and it never worked right for him. I'm not quite sure why that was. I think it was because Dungeon Master wanted him to sort of learn to roll with the punches. I had a number of questions from fans as to why I didn't have Presto get Dungeon Master's power when I wrote the Dungeon Master for a Day script. And the answer was, of course, because Eric was the one who stood to benefit the most from it. He was the one who stood to learn the most from having Dungeon Master's power. But it would have been interesting to have seen what Presto would have done with it.
What do we
On the rumors of the relationship between Hank and Sheila, I can clarify that right now. I don't know. I sort of played that there was one, but you couldn't get real overt with these things on Saturday morning. Obviously they were fond of each other, but I always sort of felt that there was kind of a relationship between Hank and Diana. So, and I thought there might be a kind of an interesting little jealousy triangle going on there, but you really couldn't play that. So, for the most part, we just kind of stayed away from that, or at least I did.
I mean, I fouled up sending us home. I destroyed the Golden Grimoire.
But you were willing to lay down your life for your comrades.
He's right, Eric. You risked your life to save us.
I did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Wow, I must be nuts.
I don't know if Eric became softer over the seasons. I think he grew up some. I think he became considerably more aware of other people, their feelings, and his relationships with them. I think he became more of an adult, or at least started on that path. And he certainly learned to work with the others better. And that was a good direction for him to go, I thought. Bobby and Sheila, well, they were brother and sister, and they had the classic brother and sister relationship. Sheila was overprotective of Bobby. Bobby didn't want to be protected, and Bobby really didn't need to be protected because he had that big old club and he could pretty much whip anybody who showed up. Bobby was a little 8-year-old barbarian. You can always count on Bobby to throw a monkey wrench into things. In terms of story construction, this can be a good thing, and we used that a lot. It was fun. Sheila couldn't really steal anything, even though she was a thief, because the Standards and Practices division of the network didn't really want a thief who would steal anything. That was not a good thing to have on children's television. So she would do things like take keys to get the kids out of jail or things like that, but that was about the extent of it. Despite Diane being one of the first Afro-American characters on TV, we never really drew any attention to that. There was really no point to it. For one thing, she was in a world of such incredible diversity of characters where there were not only different races, but different species and different all kinds of things, that the fact that she was Afro-American was sort of lost in the shuffle. And so we never thought there was any point drawing any attention to it. She was just one of the gang, and her goals were the same as everyone else's. She wanted to get home. Yeah, I think they were good role models. I think Hank was a good leader of the group. I think Eric was a good role model in that he grew, he became a better person. He came from being a spoiled rich kid to being a not quite so spoiled rich kid. And I think the rest of them were, if not good role models, at least fun kids to hang around with and to spend half an hour with. I don't know about whether it was necessary for them to be good role models or not. They were entertaining. That's all they really needed to be. That's all the show really needed to be. It wasn't a heavy message show. It was necessary, that was entertaining, that we told good stories. That's all I set out to do anyway. It's a show that I look back on with great fondness. I consider it to be one of the most fun shows I ever worked on. It's really a high point in my career in animation in terms of satisfaction, a job well done. And it's really nice to know that it's appreciated. I mean, I still get fan mail on the show, or I get fan email all the time. It's nice to get that. A lot of times you sit there, you write these scripts, and they just sort of go out, and there's no real connection sometimes. And to get all this feedback from people saying that they've seen the show and they enjoy it and that did something for them, it's nice. I really do appreciate it. I heard the show was canceled a few weeks after I turned in the final draft of Requiem. And needless to say, I was rather disappointed because that meant that the show wouldn't be filmed and it wouldn't be aired. And that's really too bad because I really wanted to see that show done. But this happens in television. It happens a lot. And all you can do is, just sort of like shrug and say, oh well, take the money and move on. Requiem was written in such a way that if the show was not picked up, as opposed to being canceled, then it served as an ending for the show. But if it was picked up, then we could move the kids on to another level, take the show in a different direction. So it was written to serve either way, and that was the main point for doing it. The title I originally wanted to give the show was Redemption. It was changed to Requiem, I believe, because CBS felt that the other title was giving too much away, but it's hard to remember. It's been a long time. In the script, it pretty much says that Venger is Dungeon Master's son. And I believe that was something that I came up with, that they agreed to on the show. And again, it's been a while, but I think that that was my pitch, and they agreed to it. Requiem was the third part of that trilogy, in which the kids splinter into two factions. One of them wanting to follow Venger because they believe that he will take them home, and the other wanting to stay with Dungeon Master. It's sort of a natural evolution from the first two stories. And they actually split apart. They go to war over it. And at the end, they come together again and realize that they have to work together and believe in each other if they're going to survive. I heard that some fans are going to animate Requiem by themselves a year or so ago, and I was rather astonished and rather pleased. I look forward to seeing what the final product will be.
My name is George DeLuca. I'm working on animating Michael Reaves' final script for the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon.
Avenger.
When I was 16 years old, Dungeons & Dragons first aired, and I became addicted to it. And I had an old VCR at the time. That's when they first came out, basically, and I began taping them every week. What attracted me to the show was, of course, the plot. These kids were plucked out of their normal lives. They were kids who normally wouldn't associate with each other. They became friends, and they became friends in part out of necessity, but I honestly believe they began to care for each other, looked out for each other, with an excellent plot line, the classic good versus evil. The way I found out it was canceled was I had my VCR set to record it, and when I went to watch it, because I had other things I was doing at the time, it wasn't there anymore. And I was quite surprised and shocked. I didn't start pursuing it until I first found out about the internet. I got my own internet connection, and one day I just happened to remember the cartoon and decided to do a search for it, which I ran across several websites, which led me to Michael Reaves' script. I actually began searching to see if other people had been working on the script. I found a couple of sites where they were stating that that's what they were going to do, or that's what they were doing, only to find out that they were outdated. So I sat down one day and thought to myself, why don't I do it? I used to do this kind of thing with animation, so it seemed a perfect thing to do. I figured out that I would be the one doing it when I got an email from the last group that stated that they were doing it, and had stated that they were actually no longer doing it, that the website was out of date. And that's when I began to animate the title sequence. And I've just gone on from there. It was actually 6 months into it that I realized how big it was going to be as far as the characters, hand drawing them, finding existing footage, going through my own VHS tapes to find actual episodes. I created a website because I started to realize the enormity of it, hoping to get some people to volunteer to help me out. And I've been very successful so far with that. It's actually turned into a labor of love in that it's something I really enjoy doing. I've always liked to do animation. I've always liked to do something with computers in what they can do, especially as they've gotten more powerful, which has enabled everybody to do essentially what they want to do. What I'm using is a PC with Aurora for 2D character drawing, for Eric and all the other main characters. I use Lightwave 3D for the background images for bigger characters like the Hydra, the Bronze Dragon for the Galleon, things like that.
This thing's got more legs than T-Man!
There's no place to hide. It's gonna get us, sooner or later.
The way I found voice actors was I initially tried to pursue the original voice actors, which I ran across one, which was Katie Leigh, and she very, very kindly volunteered to do the voice of Sheila. I also posted on my website a request for other people, whoever wanted to volunteer. I ran across a group from England who is doing a live action version, and they volunteered to do the voice actors of all the other characters.
I think that the script that I wrote works as a fairly decent legacy for the show. I think it wraps everything up pretty well. I think that if they had continued the show, it would have served as a good springboard for a new direction. I wish that they had, done it at the time, but they didn't. And so if somebody actually is able to finish animating a version out there on the web, then maybe that'll serve as a sort of closure for all the people out there who want to know how it ended.
If you were to take Michael Reaves' script, download it from the internet, load it into a word processor, and print it, it would come out to be 44 pages big. After a year and a half of working on it, I'm on page 10.
I've seen about a minute of the animation so far, and some of it looks pretty good.
What I had planned to do with it is make it into one large file for anybody and everybody who wants to can download it and enjoy it up for themselves.
All I can say is I'm flattered and touched that you enjoyed the show, and I'm really glad that all these years later we're finally able to find some kind of closure for it, and I hope you enjoy the final episode in whatever form.